I realize that I stutter a lot and it's kind of embarrassing. Oh yeah, this was about the cross stitch thing. Hold on. It took me a couple months to do it, and it took up a lot more memory than I thought it would, because I've done 2 cross stitch patterns before. I mean, those took a while. But I thought that this one was so small, I could do it quickly. But no, sir. I'll get into the groove. I'm just getting warmed up. I haven't talked in front of a mic in a long time. It feels like 20 years. I feel like I've gone to war and back emotionally because I thought that while I was doing this cross stitch, I could watch something or listen to something. And it just so happens that right before I started doing the cross stitch, there was this whole 20-year anniversary thing for Supernatural. I hadn't seen Supernatural in like 10 years, so I just started getting all these panel videos in my recommended. I went down a rabbit hole. First it was panel compilations, and then it was me telling myself, no, I'm not gonna watch the whole show again. I never finished it. I went to like the end of season 12, and that's all I had seen. And I was like, no, it's just too much. I have too much to do. And then I found this cross-stitch pattern that has been sitting in my archives for like 3 years. My mom got it for me, and I had just never gotten around to it. So I was like, this might be interesting, because I was also having a hard time trying to figure out what to draw. I do have one lined up, or like a drawing lined up, but this cross stitch took precedence. So I decided it would be interesting for me to try to record myself cross stitching, but it would be a little bit tough because it's hard to find an angle, and also it would be difficult for me to stay still, because I don't have, I don't know, do they even exist? Like cross-stitch stands? Yes, they do. Holy cow. That looks nice. If I had a stand, that would be great. I didn't have one this time, so I'm just gonna have to deal. So then I organized all the colors. I looked at all the colors, and I realized this particular pattern, man, that's one of my favorite words, particular. It sent me the colors and everything, but none of the colors were labeled, and they were all in a big bundle. Some strands of the same color were completely separate, so I spent about an hour and a half separating all the colors and using my magnificent eyes to discern the different shades. That took a while, but then I also realized there's this color at the bottom of the list. It's number 26, and it's supposed to be DMC 3866, which I think has been discontinued. I know there have been some colors that have been discontinued, which is unfortunate, but it's supposed to be a pale gray. Instead, they sent me like a regular brown. And so towards the end of the cross stitch, I decided, I didn't decide this towards the end of the cross stitch. I decided this way in the beginning. I'm gonna waste more time, and I'm just gonna see what they expect me to do with this. Just in case. I just wanna see what it looks like, just to see what they were thinking. And it looked like the cat had found the chocolate fountain. So then I had to undo, I knew this ahead of time. I did all the brown in the pale gray spots, and then I was like, that looks stupid. And so I undid it all, which took an extra day. I don't know if I would say it was entirely worth it. I used white instead. So we had double the white, no pale gray. But I think it actually turned out better without the pale gray, because throughout the pattern there's a lot of embroidery. I was thinking of just skipping it all, but then I was like, there needs to be some definition. So I only did the eyes and the nose, and I decided to leave the whole background unoutlined. And I think I like it better. Okay, if you take a picture with a camera, like a really good camera, and you focus on something that's closer to the lens, stuff in the background is all blurred out, you know? Like if you take a picture of this, if this was a real cat and a monarch butterfly was behind it, I don't think you would really see the outline on the wings. Man, this is taking forever to install. Anyway, I'm getting ahead of myself. Where's my notebook? Why did I just decide to do this random cross stitch that I've had in my closet for 3 years? It's because every fiber of my being needed to finish it before starting anything else. It wasn't even for the sake of a warm-up. It was just, I just need it to be gone, because it's kind of been in the junk pile, you know? But I think it's cute. It's interesting. The packaging wasn't up to snuff, but that's okay. I'm not complaining, because it all worked out in the end. And it gave me an opportunity to kind of use my brain, what little I have left, to take some initiative and experiment with things. And I decided not to outline all that it told me to outline in the eye. And I also probably didn't do it entirely correctly, but man, that's a lot of, what are they called? Adverbs? I Googled it, and I also looked at the instructions on the pattern. Well, I looked at the instructions on the pattern, but it didn't say exactly how to embroider stuff, so it's probably expecting whoever bought this to know what they're doing, which I don't. Using what comprehension levels I have, I figured it out. It's all a matter of the results, right? Figuring out... Okay, hold on. I'm trying to install this thing at the same time as talking about something that happened 2 months ago. What was I talking about? Oh yeah, my comprehension skills. which are non-existent. Long story short, I'm happy with the result, and it's, it's great. When I first started it, I saw the number 2 on the column next to the colors, which is the number of strands that it requires. I thought that meant 2 whole strands, like folded in half. It's been a while since my last cross stitch. I started with 4 total strands, and I was like, man, this is kind of thick. And then I realized, oh, 1 strand folded in half equals 2. And then I did the whole cross stitch by, I guess it doesn't really matter. It's just all a matter of preference. But I did the whole cross stitch by putting the thread through the needle one way, kind of a tedious way. And it was like right at the very end when I remembered the way that I did it before. So that was stupid. The most difficult thing was to not get my face or head in front of the camera. So I tried to put the pattern in a place where, like, I didn't really care if it showed up, but I tried to put it in a place where I wouldn't have to look at it really closely. Unfortunately, my eyesight is atrocious, I have discovered. How it looks to the viewer on the camera is not dissimilar from how I would see it in real life. It was really difficult to do it in a timely manner. I ended up using... It took up a lot of memory. I had to buy a 6 terabyte hard drive in order to keep all this together. And the first half of the cross stitch, I was recording everything. But then at some point, I don't really remember when, I started to do sections off camera. I would start a color and then turn the camera off, do that whole section, and then turn the camera back on when I was at the end of that section. Or I would just do like whole colors that didn't have much area covered, just for the sake of storage space. I learn things. I mean, I knew it was going to take up a lot of memory, but I didn't actually realize that 55 hours worth of footage was so much. As to be expected, I'm going to get rid of most, if not all, of the footage after this, and hopefully my computer doesn't explode. In the beginning, I thought that cross-stitching wasn't as complicated as a whole as something like knitting or crocheting. I've never embroidered, so I'm pretty sure that's fairly complicated. But then towards the end, I realized, oh, this is actually kind of complicated. One thing that I've never done before is the half. I don't know what to call them. I've only I don't know what to call them because I've only crocheted, so I'm just going to call them like half stitches. This is what made the pattern extremely difficult to read. There were some points on the pattern where there was a symbol that took up only half of the square, and then there was shading in those halves that indicated a little stitch, and you'd have to poke like right in the middle of the square. This is what I assumed. I didn't actually Google this. I looked at the instructions on the pattern, so I did what I thought was being instructed. I mean, the trick is just having glasses and being able to see what in the world you're doing. So at the very beginning, I was talking about the supernatural panels, which I hadn't watched any since I was like 13 or 14. So back in like 2015 or 16, I thought, what the hey, I'm gonna watch some, at least compilations. That's where it started. And then it went into whole panels because I really like listening to people talk. It obviously depends on who the person is. And this whole time, I have receipts because I sent my sister a text message saying I'm not tempted to watch the whole show. And then I started this cross stitch. What am I going to do while I work on this cross stitch? Because it's probably going to take me a couple weeks. I've watched a bunch of movies before. I went on a whole Matt Damon binge, so I might as well just, just for fun, watch the entirety of Supernatural. And I finished it about 3 or 4 days ago. I liked the show a lot more than I thought I would. And I realized how much I liked the show when I watched the last episode. At first, like the first season, I was like, this is cheesy, of course there are cheesy moments. There are cheesy moments in everything, it's drama. I didn't care. I was just doing the cross stitch on the side, which, side note, it's really difficult for me to do things on the side when something is on the TV or my computer or something, or I'm like watching an actual TV show or movie. So I'm not one to just put stuff like that on in the background. That's one of my biggest pet peeves. It's like reading. I read slowly, but I read slowly on purpose so that I can absorb all of the information. And it's the same with film or TV shows. When I watch things by myself, I back up scenes and rewatch scenes or moments over and over and over and over. I like to take my time with things and really pay attention and absorb all the information, especially when it's something that makes me really think. Cross-stitching, having to pay attention to, first of all, the camera being on and not wanting to waste footage and space. It was hard to do that and also watch a show at the same time. Eventually it got to the point where if I was watching a season finale or something. I would just not do the cross stitch at all and just watch the episode. Or, you know, sometimes I would pause for a long time and then there would be a whole gap in the filming of the thing or footage. This is all very interesting. So yeah, the first couple seasons I was like, this is fun. You know, it's kind of silly, but I like it. The story's interesting, and it was not very long before I was extremely interested in the story. And this is just one giant run-on sentence. I keep starting sentences with the word because, and it's kind of driving me nuts. Back in the day, when I was a wee lass, my sister was watching it, and she started it with my mom, and they were watching it all the way through. We started watching it right before season 11 aired, back in 2015. They binged it that summer, but I didn't watch season 1. I started the last couple episodes of season 2. I saw Sam's first death, and I saw Dean's reaction, and I saw the part where Dean sold his soul. All of a sudden, I was like, I am not ashamed to admit that when I was 13, all I saw was 2 very beautiful human beings. I only paid attention to that, and then this is I hope this is really interesting. I've been talking for a solid half hour now about nothing. Here's a fun fact. Back then, I wasn't into the show like my sister and my mom were. I took an interest in the actors. I watched all of season 3. And then for some reason, I kind of just spaced it and was in and out of consciousness while we were watching the rest of the series. I found out about Demon Dean in season 10, and that really caught my interest. And I was like, whoa, because first of all, I didn't know that there were that many seasons. Second of all, the fact that I'm seeing Dean selling his soul for his brother and then him as a demon in the future, I was like, oh, that's interesting. I didn't watch all the seasons with them. When they got to season 9 and 10, I was like, all right, here we go. And then I watched all of season 11 and then season 12, and then I kind of stopped. While I was, I think it was 7th grade. Hold on, just a second. Where is it? Aha, here they are. Got it. Back in 2015, yes. So I think transition from fall to winter of 2015. I drew portraits of Jared and Jensen. I drew a bunch of portraits of my peers in 2014. And then in 2015, these were like my pride and joy. At this point in my life, they were like the best portraits I'd ever done. And I still have the originals. I'm holding the one of Jensen Ackles in my hand. I can't find the one of Jared though, but I know it's in there somewhere. I was obsessed with the show, having only seen about 3 seasons in total. When I started this time, this is getting back to my original point. That was a big sidebar. I was kind of excited because it was like watching it for the first time because I didn't know any of the story. My excuse was, I haven't seen season 1, so I'm gonna watch it all the way through. It was really interesting to me because I knew where Sam was headed. Actually, where did I know he was headed? Because I didn't know anything about the Lucifer thing. Did I know anything? Did I know the Lucifer thing? I knew something about Sam being something dark. I thought that the foreshadowing and stuff was really interesting. And so I got really into it really quickly. Suddenly, I went from, because back in the day, I was a Dean girl. That sounds weird. Back in the day, I was a fan of Dean more than Sam, but this time around, I started really liking Sam, and, you know, as will be evident by the end of this spiel that I'm doing that is very interesting and not boring, it will be seen that I still like Dean a lot. Somehow I knew, and I don't know how, but somehow I knew that Sam was gonna have a dark twist to his storyline, and I didn't know when it was going to happen. I don't even remember what I knew. I think I did know that he was Lucifer's vessel. Yeah, I did know. I did know that he was Lucifer's vessel. And so I saw the trajectory in the really early seasons that just got me so interested. And then I just got really interested in Sam. Anyway, so I got really interested really quickly. Suddenly I was just binging it all over the summer. I never got into any of the fandom stuff. I have been in a fandom before and kind of learned that I'm not quite cut out for it. Everything on the internet to me is kind of, terrifying. I just wanted to watch the show without any, involvement in anything. I was just going to watch it by myself. See, the thing is, it kind of, at least while I'm watching something, seeing any comments from anything or any fandom and seeing complaints has the potential to kind of ruin the fun. When I watch stuff, I tend to, oh man, how do I word this? I wrote it down, actually. Let's say that a character I really like does something dumb. I don't automatically think that the writers were dumb for writing that. I'd much rather look at the character in the context of the world. So instead, I think that character was dumb for doing or thinking something that they did or thought. Because in real life, people are dumb. Going into something, watching it, and being like, let's see if these writers are really good. That train of thought, I don't really like it. Partially because I know that I couldn't do any better. If a character is being kind of stupid, to me, they're just being stupid. That's why with fandoms and stuff, I didn't want to get involved in any internet stuff when I started this. I knew how big the fandom was. I didn't want to, have that filter of like, oh, the writers made this decision, because I don't care. And I thought that the whole thing was extremely interesting, including the ending. The ending I really liked. Not because I liked Dean dying, but because it was, in my opinion, very well done. And the way that I can say that is how much it affected me. I would say that I hesitate to say that I'm fully recovered. I still maybe have 1% of my emotional constitution that needs to be fortified. So the whole thing was great. And I really liked it. And part of the reason I enjoyed it so much was because it was just me viewing it, analyzing it and stuff. I mean, it wasn't like I stayed completely separate from everything that everyone was saying, but if I saw something like a complaint, I had to like really get it out of my brain so that it didn't ruin the whole viewing experience, as the folks say. That being said, I really enjoyed watching all the panels. I have not watched all the panels. There are like 800 of them. Anyway, towards the beginning, here's the thing. The show, it's so long, and yet they went so strong for the entire thing. And I don't know how they did it. Before I watched it again, I was like, oh yeah, they went on for so long. It probably, kind of fizzled out at the end. But then I watched it and I was like, no, it didn't. Even the filler cases, even those cases were really creative, and I liked watching those. I don't know how they did it, but they somehow threaded the needle through those things to connect the main story to those. Maybe Sam or Dean would learn a life lesson. So before I thought that it would fizzle out, but I was proven wrong very strongly. But the interesting thing is that the first 5 seasons is like one movie, and then 6 to 10 is the sequel, and then 11 to 15 is the third movie. You could definitely see the different acts in those 3 parts. The first half of the season, I think up until the trials of hell that Sam was going through, up to season 9, it was like Sam was like the main character. Not that Sam and Dean were both the main characters through the whole thing, but Sam was the one that was just like going through it, through the first half. Dean was going through it a lot. They probably went through it almost equally, except for, Sam going to the cage. And anyway, then the second half was when, with the whole Mark of Cain thing and the demon thing, and it did a 180. Dean was now the one that was really going through it. I liked that 180, because they took their turns with everything. In the middle of it, I think when I was in season 9 or something, I wrote 2 pages of thoughts, basically explaining what I was saying before about how I don't like going into watching a movie or a TV show with the intention to think, this is the decision the writers made, or this was a dumb decision that they made, instead of thinking like this character is just dumb, like a real person would be dumb. I wrote down an example just in case anyone's interested, in case I'm not filling enough time. Maybe I'll cut this out. I don't know. It's much more enjoyable and interesting for me to think about why the character would do or think certain things rather than wonder why the writers would write them. Because if watching movies and TV shows is all about grading the quality of the writer, I don't know what the point is in watching them, because that's just kind of like school. I don't want to grade things. I mean, not all books have perfect grammar. Writers break the rules all the time. And there's charm in that. It makes it interesting. As for character decisions, just because someone does or thinks something I think is dumb, it doesn't mean they think it's dumb. This is the example that I wrote down. You know what? I'm being completely transparent. Let me just read what I wrote down instead of trying to paraphrase it. Sam completed 2 trials of hell before his brother convinced him to stop. Dean's reasoning was understandable. The trials were going to kill Sam, and Dean was willing to let evil walk the earth if it meant saving Sam's life. He told Sam,
I'm willing to let this bastard and all the sons of bitches that killed Mom walk, because of you. Don't you dare think that there is anything, past or present, that I would put in front of you.
The gates of hell remained open. The angels fell from heaven, and Sam fell into a coma. In his head, he had the choice to fight to stay alive or let go and die. He chose death, but in an effort to save him, Dean manipulated Sam into accepting assistance from an angel by being possessed temporarily. In the end, the angel turned on Dean, and Sam, having discovered what happened, ejected him. So both sides are completely understandable, because Dean was willing to sacrifice everything to keep his brother with him, and Sam was willing to sacrifice himself to close the gates of hell. But the kicker is, according to Sam, Dean didn't save Sam for Sam, he only saved him for Dean. He was mad because the gates of hell remained open, all because he couldn't stand the thought of letting his brother go. However, I would argue that Sam is the more selfish one in that situation, and he knows it. It would be fair for Sam to want to sacrifice his life for the greater good, if the greater good still happened. But the greater good was to close the gates of hell, and he still wanted to die after the greater good failed. The angel still fell, hell was still open, and if Sam let himself die, Dean would be alone to fight demons, monsters, and angels alone. The world was in a much worse situation after that whole thing failed, and Sam was willing to die, but he was no longer sacrificing himself for any greater good or anything. He just wanted a break. But he still claimed that Dean was in the wrong in that moment. And I think that he held on to that for so long because he knew that he wanted to die so he could just have a break. And Dean didn't let him have a break. I think that's what made him mad. So that whole example was just to illustrate why I like thinking of decisions and things in the context of the world, because neither side is painted as the right or the wrong side. They were both kind of being dumb, but they're also both right in certain aspects.
You two get over it. The drama, the fighting. It's stupid.
Anyway, that was like a really long-winded way of saying that I don't like looking at entertainment as a grading assignment. And that's why I overthink characters and plots. It's fun. That's the reason why. Where was I? What was I thinking before? I hope that actually made sense, because I was looking at something that I wrote on Google Docs a while ago while I was in season 9 with the whole conflict with Sam and Dean, and Sam being mad at Dean for not letting him die, and Dean being like, well, I couldn't live without you. So that was like a really heated conflict right up until the end of the season. I was fine with it, because to me it just seemed like Sam was projecting. Anyway, I need to stop rambling about it. I could talk for hours about it, and my voice is getting really tired. If you can't tell, it's getting kind of scratchy. Not everybody wants to hear me talk about the plot of Supernatural for hours and hours and hours. So fast forward to the end. I knew how it was going to end. And okay, sidebar, I'm not even going to defend myself, because the reason, well, I mean, I guess this is a defense, but the reason I'm talking so much about this is because this is all I could think about while I was cross-stitching this thing. And if I'm talking about what's going through my brain, or the thought process, or, you know, the process of anything or any art project that I do, it would be nice to actually talk about what I was thinking about instead of trying to come up with things that are relevant to say. I know I said I wasn't going to defend myself because I'm not ashamed, but that was a defense, because I'm ashamed. From the beginning, I knew how it ended. Like, I knew that Dean died. I knew that Cass went to the empty. One thing I didn't know is that Cass kind of came out of the empty. I knew that Sam had a son and was married by the end, and then he died and went to, so I knew how it all ended, and I was gearing up for the end. I was so prepared. Well, I knew that I wasn't actually going to be ready, but I thought that I was ready. There are no words to describe how unprepared I was for actually viewing it in context. I had seen glimpses of the barn scene, but I hadn't seen how long the barn scene was, nor did I know how early it was in the episode. It wasn't like I had to come to terms with the ending before I got to the end, like when I knew how it ended. I didn't really have to come to terms, because I knew that Sam and Dean died all the time. This one was just permanent, and it's not like they were separated forever, you know? And I thought the other times that they died were sad. Somehow, and I don't know how they did it, Sam and Dean died so many times, or almost died so many times, but every time they did, it was always so gut-wrenching, or whatever you want to call it. It was really sad. More often than not, when they would die, maybe there were some tears shed. I think I even caught some of my crying on camera. Yes, I'm crying. I'm fine. I'm okay. If I did catch it on camera, it was the time that Dean died at the end of season 9. So I thought I was so prepared, but I wasn't, and I got to it. I knew I was going to cry, but I didn't actually realize how much I was going to cry. I'm actually really embarrassed about it, but it's okay, because, how many people didn't cry? I did actually like the ending a lot, because I had reasoned it out in my mind beforehand. So I heard Jared say one time that if both brothers were alive, the show would still be going on, and I agree with that. So then we're left with at least one brother dying. So if Sam died and Dean was alive, first of all, it's already happened, and we saw Dean trying to live a normal life. I think the way that Dean handles grief, and just the way that he's wired, without Lisa, without anything to fall back on, because he didn't have anything to fall back on. Sam had Eileen to fall back on, but Dean didn't have anyone. So let's say in season 15, Sam died in the barn instead of Dean. Dean would probably go into, like rock bottom. His whole thing was to protect Sam, and that's why he sold his soul in the very beginning.
I had one job, and I screwed it up. I blew it.
And so if he failed to protect Sam at all, it probably would have eaten him alive. But Sam from the beginning was put up as a guy who could handle being by himself and living a, what normal life he could. But Dean couldn't live without Sam. And I mean, you can see in the barn scene, if I remember correctly, he told him that the reason he got him at school is because he couldn't live without Sam. And you can see it through the whole series, except for in season 6, like with Lisa. Dean never really considered being okay without Sam because I don't think he could. You just listen to his speech in season 2 when Sam is lying on the table dead. And he's like, I had one job and I screwed it up. And then he sold his soul. So I think that just sets it up. Like, you see how Dean is wired, and he couldn't handle it. And so if Sam died in that way, or in any way, and Dean didn't have anything to fall back on, I think that he would have just maybe, drowned himself in alcohol, and it would have been that kind of a tragedy, which may have been, to me, less bittersweet and more just plain better. Dean would have probably died a lot sooner than Sam did after Dean died. And so Dean dying, it's like Dean fulfilled his purpose, and with Chuck gone and everything, Sam would have been able to escape the hunting life without being dragged back into it. And also, it's apparent in, season 1 and season 8, even though I think Sam regrets the whole Amelia thing, that he allowed himself to consider a life without Dean and without hunting. That's my reasoning for thinking that the ending is good, even though it's extremely sad and it's still a little bit gut-wrenching. So I knew the reason for it happening that way, I wasn't so attached to Dean that I just didn't like the ending because Dean died, But man, the way that they did it was so good. It's been, I'm 4 days removed from viewing the last episode. It took me about 2 days to be able to think about it. Another day to recover a little more, being able to see clips from previous episodes without getting extremely sad. And then another day to now to actually be able to talk about the entire thing. Beforehand, I was like, okay, as soon as I finish Supernatural, like the day of or the day after, I'm gonna go and talk about it all so that I didn't miss anything. And then I watched the last episode and I was like, maybe that's not such a good idea. I think I would actually cry on, not camera, on microphone. So I waited a few more days. Today's Monday. And so, what better time to start? I would not be surprised if at some time in the future I watched the entire thing again, maybe in a year or 2 or 3. I've been talking for an hour straight like this. Also, when I get embarrassed about something, I talk really fast and loud. So, yeah, through that whole thing, I was cross-stitching. I mean, I finished the actual cross-stitch around season 11. Total, I don't know the time because I didn't film it all. And I still have 50 hours worth of footage to go through. So I can't judge by the video lengths and add them all together and then determine how long it took me. But the good news is I only cross-stitched when I was watching Supernatural. I think it took me about, if I squish it all down, it's probably 9 or 10 seasons straight. So yeah, just add up how many hours that is, and that's probably how many hours it took me. At least 50 hours. This wasn't a review, by the way. It kind of turned into one, but it wasn't. I was just talking about that so that you would know what went through my mind while I cross-stitched this thing. You can literally say, because at the very beginning I cut myself and I accidentally got blood on the fabric. Not a joke, kind of gross. I cried a lot and accidentally got tears on the fabric. And it was also kind of hot because it was summertime. I'm not just giving people permission to say this, but you have to say blood, sweat, and tears went into this cross stitch. I'll admit that I watched the last 3 or 4 seasons, like after I finished the cross stitch, I watched those and just doodled the entire time. I have a bunch of Sharpies. My rambliness might be because I was doodling before this with thin Sharpies. I might have gotten a little high. I think it was a good experiment. I think I want to do more. I want to do more cross stitches. Anyway, my voice hurts and I'm hungry. It is lunchtime. Oh, before I go, the whole storyline with Michael and Lucifer, Dean being Michael's true vessel and Sam being Lucifer's true vessel, that whole thing was so fascinating to me. I had an image in my head, kind of abstract, but also realistic. But I had a whole, I don't know if I would call it composition because I don't take myself that seriously, a whole thing in my head, an image that I want to create or draw. It has something to do with Michael and Lucifer as Sam and Dean. And that is all I will say. The last thing I wanted to say was, I think I was just reiterating how good the barn scene was, but it's not that I had a pleasant time with it. It affected me so much, it kind of speaks to how good it was. Very tragic ending. Here's the thing. I thought I liked tragedies. Usually I can tolerate dwelling on the tragedy, but this one was such a tragedy that I couldn't think about it for a couple days. Now I'm fine. Usually I don't get that torn up about fictional characters, and some people may be embarrassed about it. I know I am. I'm fine. Everyone's fine. Everyone's gonna be fine. Dean's not really dead because, you know, he's not real. So I was doing that whole spiel because, you know, you want to know what I was thinking while I was, not you, but, you know, it would be nice. Maybe it would be nice. I don't know. But, you know, it's... There's a lot of knowledge being thrown around. What was going through my mind while doing this cross-stitch is relevant. Took like 3 terabytes of storage space. That's one of the reasons I'm not recording my face. Audio files aren't as big as video files, so we're just gonna stick with stick figures. But until I watch the show all the way through, again, which I will give myself some time to recover, I'll just watch panels. All right, see ya. I just ran up and down the stairs. One more thing that I forgot to mention. My favorite thing about it was, of course, the dynamic between Sam and Dean being brothers. That is probably everyone's favorite part of the show. That is the reason that I was so sad in the end. This whole show, I don't know how they did it, but it was very unique. There's so much in it, and there's so much to tackle. It is no wonder that it has stuck with so many people for so long. Now I finally understand why it has. Well, maybe I'll never understand fully, or maybe I'll never be able to explain, but I understand. And just, I don't know, just the fact that Jared and Jensen are like brothers in real life, like, come on, you never really hear that. It'll definitely be a core memory for me, and it will stick with me for a very long time.